Welcome back to Why Does This Dog Look Like That? Today we're talking about the wild, multicultural story of hairless dogs and following the hairless gene's surprisingly epic journey around the world. So we first see references to hairless dogs in ancient Mesoamerica. The Xoloitzcuintle is one of the oldest documented dog lineages in the world, likely dating back over 3,500 years. Legend describes this dog created by Xolotl, the Aztec god of fire, lightning, and the underworld, with Itzcuintle meaning dog. Xolotl created these dogs from a splinter of the bone of life from which humans were made, and gifted them to humankind so that they could guide humans on their journey through the 9 levels of the underworld. Because of this, Xolos were often ritually sacrificed and buried with their owners to accompany them in the afterlife. They were specifically tasked with escorting humans across the unswimmable river Apanahuacalvia, only doing so if they deemed their owner worthy of their help. So hopefully you didn't mistreat your dog on Earth. These ties to the afterlife also meant they could foresee impending death and protect their owners from evil spirits. And since they're hairless and their skin is warm to the touch, they were believed to have healing powers and were often used as bed warmers for sick people, warding off disease and relieving pain from chronic ailments. This spiritual reverence accompanies hairless dogs as they spread outward from Mesoamerica. In the Incan Empire, we see the emergence of the Peruvian hairless dog, and similarly, in these cultures, they're believed to have healing powers, an ability to sense spirits and foresee death, and are given a special role in the afterlife. Similar lore can also be seen with the Bolivian Cala, Ecuadorian hairless dog, and the Argentine Pila dog. When the Spaniards arrived, they really shook things up, to say the least. The conquistadors brought their own dogs to the Americas, and were also pretty determined to wipe out indigenous culture entirely. So most native dogs were killed, genetically diluted out, and mostly displaced by European dogs. But many Xolos and other hairless dogs lived on, because this isn't just a spiritual story, it's also a genetic one. When we genetically analyze hairless dogs, we find that they're more closely related to the fully coated dogs in their respective regions than they are to one another, suggesting that this mutation can be incorporated into dog populations, rendering them hairless instead of representing a specific breed in and of itself. That's because this type of hairlessness is really just a single dominant mutation of the FOXI3 gene. And honestly, I don't know how researchers audibly say it, but we're going to call her the FOXY3 mutation. This affects development of the ectoderm, which among other things forms hair and teeth, which is why hairless dogs are also prone to alterations in tooth development. In fact, inheriting 2 mutant copies of this gene is incompatible with life. All hairless dogs are heterozygotes, meaning they have one normal copy and one hairless mutant copy of FOXY3, which is also why most of them retain patches of fur. If you breed 2 hairless dogs, a quarter of the embryos won't finish development, half of the litter will be hairless, and a quarter of the litter will be fully coated. They will likely physically resemble the regional dog population the gene was introduced into. This is probably why there's a lot of historical confusion and mysticism around where these dogs originated. You might recognize that Xolo mythology is very similar to the Techichi or Chihuahua ancestor. Dogs in general fulfilled similar spiritual and cultural roles throughout Mesoamerican history, and in theory, the hairless mutation could have been integrated into whatever dog populations existed at a given time. But how did hairless FOXY3 get all the way to China? Fast forward to the age of exploration, and transatlantic trade loved these sorts of oddities. And especially because of their rumored spiritual and healing powers, hairless dogs inevitably made their way into port cities in East Africa, dogs that would later be described as African hairless dogs or Abyssinian sand terriers. Maritime trade with the Far East furthered their propagation. It's possible that hairlessness was even preferred in ratting dogs on ships, as they were able to endure long hot journeys and weren't as vulnerable to flea infestations. But the extent to which it's selected for is unknown. In any case, FOXY3 eventually made her way to Southeast Asia, where hairless dogs were also revered for their healing powers, with some Chinese legends even referring to naked medicine dogs kept by emperors that could cure illness. In Europe, the hairless mutation remained an oddity, likely because it was either viewed as a defect or as incompatible with their cold winters. At some point in the 1800s, hairless dogs started receiving more attention through trade with China, with traders romanticizing them as the Chinese royal hairless right around the time other Asian lapdogs were were becoming trendy in the West. Breeders in Europe and the United States began curating a fancy new breed of dog, likely by combining hairless dogs imported from Asia with a mix of European toy breeds to ultimately end up with the fabulous Chinese crested. And since Foxy 3 behaves the same in this breed, a quarter of them are actually born with fur, which is the powder puff variant. American hairless terriers, however, don't follow this same rule, and that's because their hairlessness is actually the result of an entirely different mutation. And in fact, all of them are the descendants of one single rat terrier named Josephine, born in Louisiana in the 1970s. Josephine had a recessive SGK3 mutation that actually produces true hairlessness without the dental or fertility complications we see in the Foxy 3 mutation. However, since they are all descended from Josephine and some sus mating of her offspring was needed to fix the gene in its founding stock, a lot of careful outcrossing with coated rat terriers has been needed to introduce genetic diversity and make this population viable. But at this point, when very carefully bred, American hairless terriers do have enough genetic diversity to support a healthy population. Thanks so much for watching till the end. Let me know if you want me to keep doing Guess the Pun, but I'm going to test out some new designs in my TikTok shop. I honestly would love some feedback there, but you can also support me by just interacting with my content. And as always, please let me know in the comments if there are any other dog or cat breeds or topics in general that you want me to cover in future videos.